As an attorney, how do you balance building a legal practice while remaining deeply involved in public service? Kristina Lawson, managing partner at Hanson Bridgett and former mayor of Walnut Creek, has made a career out of successfully balancing both worlds. I'm Jack Needham, and in today's episode of In the Counsel's Chair, Kristina shares with us her insider's perspective, answering that key question, and many more. All of that coming right up. Kristina Lawson, thank you so much for joining the Daily Journal's new podcast, In the Counsel's Chair. We're so happy to have you along today. As I'll explain in a second, I really want this episode to sort of focus on the dual aspects of your professional life. But we might start by you giving us a background on your legal sector experience, what your current role is, what your practice area is, and what led you to your current position.
Sure. Well, it's really nice to be with you. Thanks for having me on the inaugural year of this new podcast. I really appreciate it. I am currently the managing partner of Hanson Bridgett. We're about 215 lawyers all across California. We are an AmLaw 200 firm, and with offices all across California, we actually just opened our 8th office earlier this year. So we are a full-service California-based law firm. My area of expertise from a substantive perspective is land use and environmental law, mostly on the entitlement processing side. So working with local governments, working with clients to make sure that projects are permitted all across California. I say that that's my area of substantive expertise, but I am a full-time managing partner these days. So I spend the substantial majority of my time focusing on leading Hanson Bridgett.
All right, amazing. And I'm glad you mentioned local government because that's the other aspect of your professional life that I really would love to focus on today. We'll dive into the details of that in a second, but if you could just trace your history of involvement in government, when did that first start and what are the different roles that you've held?
Gosh, you're going to take me all the way back to high school if we start this
We love it.
conversation. Because I mean, the reality is I started as an intern while I was in high school, interning in the office of my local assembly person down in Southern California. And then my interest in government obviously has continued. I still serve as an appointed official today, but as you noted, I had a stint as a local elected official in Walnut Creek, California, which is where I still live.
All right, great. Well, that brings me to my next question, which is what drew you into elected government? But noting your stint as an intern, was there something sort of in your formative years that, like, from a family aspect, from something you were taught by a teacher, anything like that kind of pushed you towards that area as being interested in government?
Yeah, I think that in my family, my parents instilled this deep sense of civic responsibility in me and in my three siblings as well. And so we've all approached that in different ways. I approached it by serving an elected office and by having an appointed position. Now, one of my siblings works for the government, so she approached it differently. But it did come, from this deep sense of civic responsibility that our parents instilled in us. And I think that, I mean, frankly, I can trace that to, my dad being an immigrant to this country. And again, just having this deep sense of gratitude for all that it gave him. And then again, a deep sense of responsibility for giving back and participating in the communities that have given so much to all of us.
Okay, and so where did law school come from that? Was that a case of, I want to give back, I want to be civically involved, if not, direct political involvement, I'll go to law school, which I feel like is often the case with a lot of lawyers. It starts
Yeah.
out as a super aspirational kind of change maker thing. Was that the same for you?
So I'm not sure it exactly came from that place, but one of the places it came from was the YMCA's Youth in Government program. So I participated in that program while I was in high school. Again, I was kind of marrying up my interests at the time. I was an intern, and I did have this, sense of interest in government, but I didn't know exactly what that was all about, frankly. So the YMCA has a program across the country. We call it Youth in Gov, but it's really the YMCA's mock legislature and court program. And so I was part of the court program there. And while I was participating in that program, I think it was my junior or senior year of high school, I actually ran for district attorney. And that was a big deal. You ran and you did kind of a mock election. I lost that election, so I was not successful. But that really was part of my formative years of thinking, what was my path going to look like as I continued my studies, continued on to college, and then of course on to law school.
Okay, great. And before I forget, you mentioned interning. Who did you intern with?
It was our local assembly person down in Santa Barbara, California.
All right, so transitioning now, that's your early years and early exposure. But when you had finished law school, you'd gone into practice. Were you immediately interested in balancing that with some sort of representative or community focus, role, like assisting with local government, or did
Yeah.
that come later?
Um, Well, the answer to your question is no. So I didn't think I was gonna, marry the 2 up, and frankly, there's a lot of things about my career that if you would have asked, "Is this how you envisioned it going?" The answer to that is no in most cases. It's really taken a fascinating path even to me, and I've been the person that's been on this journey. Of course, I was always interested in serving civically in some capacity, but had you asked me at the time I was in law school, I was very interested in things like the, Northern California Innocence Project, and serving in more legal or justice related organizations in that way. I really fell into local government here in Walnut Creek where I live primarily because I had a land use practice at the time. That a land use practice is inherently legal and political at the same time, right? You're asking decision makers for approvals for projects. Of course, you're operating in a legal rubric as well, but it's the kind of the juxtaposition or the marrying up of those two things that has really throughout my career been fascinating and interesting to me, from a strategic standpoint, just a standpoint of how you get things done here in California. And so it was really because I was on that path as a land use lawyer that I frankly, first had experiences with city councils, with planning commissions, with design review boards, the types of processes that we all go through in California if you want to get a project approved. So that's how I found myself to the city council.
Yeah, and when I hear of land use and local government and someone outside being like, maybe I should jump in, I immediately go to, this isn't working as well as it should.
Right.
Maybe I can make it work better. Was that your kind of mindset going in? Was there like one thing in particular you wanted to solve or change doing that?
Yeah, wasn't anything in particular that I was frustrated by that I really saw, as an impediment. And I say that knowing there are many, many impediments to projects in California. But the town I grew up in Santa Barbara, California, and Santa Barbara many, many years ago decided to constrain its housing supply. And it did so by not approving projects. And as a result, over time, again, Santa Barbara's become more and more expensive. Affordability is obviously a huge issue there. And my three siblings and I don't live in Santa Barbara, California, in part because as housing went away, jobs did too there. So my desire to run for local office was in part out of this memory of, how housing wasn't being built in my hometown, how that was causing people to have to move away, and really wanting to be part of solutions for the housing supply problem, creating sustainable communities that really where people could live their entire lives. So it was coming from this, I don't know, deep rooted memory. And then also my experience knowing that this was the place, meaning local government was the place that really could affect housing supply in California.
Okay. So paint the picture for us. What year was it that you decided to run for the local for local government, and how did that unfold? In
Yeah.
terms of campaigning and actually winning a place on the local council.
Well, interestingly, and maybe I'll break some news here because I haven't told this story before. I first considered running in the 2007-2008 timeframe, and I took a hard look at running then. And I actually passed on that opportunity, or maybe I'll say I was talked out of that at the time by other people who wanted to campaign for city council at the same time. And I ended up being appointed in, I think it was 2008, it may have been 2009, to the Planning Commission after the election had been held. So then I ran for election, and was elected in 2010 to the city council in Walnut Creek. I mean, from a campaign perspective, campaigns are always fascinating. It was a contested, election. There were more candidates than there were seats on the city council. I mean, much like is going on in today's politics, it was a tough campaign. I did a lot of door knocking. The rise of targeted social media and some of the targeted emailing was kind of just on its, I mean, kind of really on its way up at the time. So we were doing some innovative things there also, which were unique and interesting. But it was a typical campaign. Walnut Creek is a pretty small town. Campaigns seem to have the same impact and import, no matter how large or small.
Yeah, and I'm fascinated by, like, you were working during this time, right? You
I
was
was working during this time, and I had a brand new baby.
So how on earth do you manage all of that? How does that look? Like, are you going home after your normal, well, I mean, for attorneys, there is no really normal working hours. And then are
Yeah.
you're fitting in the campaign related stuff after that and on weekends? How did you
The answer is yes to all of that. So it was a lot of work, and you highlight something. So yes, the campaign was happening at the same time, and most jurisdictions in California, unless you're a big city mayor of Los Angeles or Oakland or San Francisco, cities like that, these are really very part-time positions. Most of them are paid a very, very small stipend. So they're not positions that in California, at least for young people in California, where you can afford to step away from your day job, so to speak. And again, participate as a local elected city council person. So I was sort of doing it all at the same time. I did spend my weekends campaigning and walking. I also relied on, I mean, many of the things I still rely on today, a lot of collaboration. I remember at the time I was coordinating with other campaigns and we were helping each other out on the campaign trail, and a lot of good people too, and getting a lot of good help and advice from friends and family members, community members, consultants, and the like as well.
Yeah. Okay. And so then you win
I
in
win, yes.
2010. What was your immediate sort of, once you've been elected, how does that look, reality compared to perception? Like, what was the biggest shock in terms of what it's really like compared to what you thought it might be like?
That's interesting. I don't think I've ever been asked that question before, but that's a really good question. I think that the most surprising thing for me, and maybe this is kind of funny, but during my campaign, there were huge signs all over town that had my face plastered on them. So huge pictures of me all over town with my name, of course. And I really was surprised at how many people recognized me in a coffee shop or said, "Hey, I've seen you somewhere before. How do I know you?" And so I always wondered during the campaign whether anyone like whether signs matter, and sometimes they do, and I think sometimes, mostly, they don't. But I was fascinated by how many people recognized me, and I was also fascinated, frankly, throughout the course of my service on the city council and as mayor, just how many people come up to you in the grocery store and want to have a conversation about something that's going on. That really does happen all the time, and it really, and from time to time, still happens. But it is something that happens quite frequently.
Yeah, and given the time period, I mean, obviously we're hyper aware now in 2025 the potential risks, I guess, to an individual's safety about that come with that public awareness. What was your experience with those interactions with community members? Was it by and large a positive experience?
I had mostly positive experiences. I think, like any city, there are times of concern, but I always felt very safe. And I will say, the police department in Walnut Creek did just an extraordinary job making sure we were all safe. And there were, and whether it was briefings about city council meeting protocol or how to keep us safe, there was one time, that someone showed up at my office at the time and looking for me and wanting to have a conversation. I don't think there was anything nefarious intended, but it was a little spooky to me. It was certainly spooky to me that they found me at work rather than finding me at City Hall. And the police just always did an extraordinary job with anything like that.
Mhm. At the start of your first year in office, was there something you wanted to achieve? Was there an agenda that you kind of really wanted to tick things off?
Yeah, in my first year in office, I will say I was in listen mode. There were a lot of things going on in the community at the time. There actually was a very significant emphasis on permitting new housing around the BART station here in Walnut Creek, Transit Village style. There also was a big emphasis on permitting some new housing in the downtown. So that was something that I campaigned on, that I was very significantly interested in. But more so, I was very interested in making it clear to the community that young people and young moms with families could serve on a city council. I think that's something that we don't see enough in our communities. So I was pretty focused on representing that demographic in our community and making it work for them.
Yeah, and to put you on the spot, what did that sort of look like? How did you uh, sort of manage to achieve that representation? Other than obviously being yourself participating in local government, but is there anything you strategically did to really do that?
Yeah, I think it was about reaching out to um, different parts of the community that maybe felt like they hadn't been reached out to previously. In Walnut Creek, just like in any community, there are lots of, long-standing civically minded groups. And sometimes those groups don't reach the younger demographic, younger generations as well as perhaps they could. Everything from sometimes our meetings would start at 3 or 4 in the afternoon and most people are at work at 3 or 4 in the afternoon and can't participate in those meetings, thinking about how we can be more open and again look for different perspectives from different cohorts in the community in a different way. So it was mostly about reaching out and mostly again about reaching out through organizations that and groups that I was a part of that others weren't a part of just because they weren't part of the same generation.
Okay. How long were you mayor for, and how was that different from just being a council member? What
Yeah.
was the step up in responsibilities?
So the mayor in, most communities in California is a rotating position. And so it rotates amongst the members of the city council who are elected. So I rotated or was selected by my peers on the city council to serve in that role in 2014, and I served in that role for that year. It was a really fun year to serve as the city's mayor. It was our centennial year, so we were celebrating the 100th anniversary of Walnut Creek, California. So I had a lot of responsibilities that year as a result, mostly celebratory, mostly to be out in the community as the representative of the community. Of course, there are more formal parts of the role, agenda setting, leading the meetings, serving as the representative of the council to the press and to the media, those sorts of things that are formal responsibilities. But most of the responsibilities are, I guess I would say, more procedural than they are substantive.
Did you think you had a leg up or an advantage over others who weren't attorneys when you came into the council role? Did it help you? Can you point to any areas where it was like, yeah, I'm really glad I know this already?
It did help me in many respects. I mean, mostly a significant number or significant part of the role of a city council member is with respect to land use planning. And that's a big broad category when you're looking at it from the government perspective. But it can be about general planning, it can be about parks, it can be about specific development projects, but a lot of it is about land use planning. And because I had that substantive expertise, I knew how to read staff reports. And so I knew how to hone in and read them. They can come in these huge, thick, hundreds and hundreds of pages of documents that you have to read before meetings. And I did have, a special skill or the superpower of knowing what was in those documents and where to hone in. So perhaps it saved me a little bit of time as I read through those. I also understood kind of foundationally the law that applied in a different way than other colleagues on the council maybe did. So I do think that that really helped me. But the understanding of process and procedure, I think it can take new council members a significant period of time to get up to speed on those things. And because I had appeared in front of city council so many times previously, I do think I had a little bit of a leg up in that regard.
Were you the only attorney on council at the time?
I was not the only attorney on the city council at the time. I believe at that time there was one other lawyer serving on the council from time to time. I would say that being a lawyer is a frequent career choice for those that then end up in local government.
What did you take from the job on city council and as mayor that transferred back to your legal practice? Considering your current position as managing partner, what were those kind of skills that you maybe wouldn't have picked up just working in a law firm?
Yeah, there are actually so many things that I use to this day. I mean, really in the management of the firm. I would say, I guess maybe most basic, if you will, is just the idea that consensus and collaboration is so important. Excuse me. On a city council, I was on a 5-member city council. So in order to get anything done, you had to be able to count to 3, right? You had to have a majority of the council in order to be able to get anything done. So if you had priorities, you needed to find others who, frankly, may or may not share those same priorities. They may have different priorities. There may be a give and take as you have those conversations. So just that trust building, that collaboration, that knowing that you need to achieve a consensus before you can move forward. I use that every day here. At Hanson Bridgett, we have 74 equity partners, and 74 equity partners vote on, some of the most important matters for this firm. And it's a requirement to build trust and to collaborate and to bring people along and get them on board, and also to be a really active listener, right, about what they're interested in and what their priorities are. I guess the other thing I would say is a lot being on a city council and ultimately voting on decisions, there's a lot of imperfect compromise. Not everybody, almost no one gets everything that they want out of a particular decision or a particular direction. And again, the same is true in law firm management. I may have a great idea, or I may think it's a great idea, but after we go through the process of stakeholder engagement and talking with the partners and talking with our professional staff and talking with our associates, et cetera, leaning into the decision making process is as important as the ultimate decision. And sometimes the ultimate decision that's made isn't where you thought you were going to be when you started off.
I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you have any case studies, any precise examples of these situations where you've been like, yeah, that's my city council skills coming through?
Here at the firm, yes, they happen. I'm not making up to say they happen on a daily basis. They happen in our budget development process here at Hanson Bridgett.
Mhm.
They happen in our partner promotion process at Hanson Bridgett. They happen as we think about we're thinking about doing some updates to our compensation system, and I use those skills really every day in terms of building consensus and listening and understanding where people are at.
Okay, great. Turning to the nitty gritty of the law, given your practice area, your time on council, has it made you look at land use questions any differently?
I think the answer to that question is yes. Knowing how things work behind the scenes in a city has been very helpful and very impactful. And frankly, to my practice and to clients specifically, the process behind the scenes in the city can sometimes be this real black box, right? You don't know how it happens. You don't understand why things take so long. You don't understand the personalities involved. And so having the knowledge of how it's working from that perspective and what's really happening, what's really going on has really, really did help me be a better lawyer and helped me counsel clients about how best to achieve their goals from an entitlement perspective. While I don't do much substantive work these days because I spend my time running the firm, probably the area where I get most involved with clients is people coming to me and for strategy questions like that. How is this really working? How can we get this done? Where are the tools? Where are the levers? And sometimes that's just about knowing, again, how a municipality, a city, county, et cetera, a special district works. And so that kind of has been my superpower as a lawyer over these years is that I had that inside and outside understanding.
Yeah. No, that's great. Just to cap off the city council period, when did you leave and what were the circumstances around that? Was that a strategic decision you made?
Yeah, I left at the end of 2014. I served 1 term on the city council. It was a strategic decision I made, and I made the decision actually after considering running for a couple of other elected offices that I chose not to run for. And when I chose not to stay on an elected path, I got off of it and decided to recommit myself to frankly working on the issues that I really cared about here in the private sector, and that's what I've had the great fortune to be able to do since I left the city council, but it was a strategic decision.
Okay, and was there one sort of key reason why that was the right decision for you at that time?
There were many key decisions, it was mostly a family decision at the time. I had looked at doing a couple of other things and decided that I didn't want to end up moving my family either across the country or somewhere else, and that I really wanted to raise my kids here in California and stay rooted in community and in the town where we've been raising our kids all these years. So it was mostly about that.
Okay. And then you mentioned that being able to advocate for those key issues that you care about better in the private sector. What are those key issues for you, and
Yeah.
what does that advocacy look like?
Yeah, we talked about housing a little bit ago, and that's been one of the key ones. I've had the great fortune of being able to work on that professionally, and entitle hundreds, thousands of units across California over the years. So that's been something that's been very important to me. And then, as I think you know, I serve as the chair of the Bay Area Council here in the San Francisco Bay Area. That's about, it's an organization of about 300 plus of the region's largest employers. And so that's an area, again, where I've really been able to focus on housing policy, economic development, affordability, these issues that really are important to Californians. And it marries up, frankly, with the practices that we have here at Hanson Bridgett as well, where we're focused on transit and infrastructure and healthcare and land use and so many other things, labor and employment. It's really been it's been a very nice way for me to focus on advancing the things that I really care about and being a lawyer at the same time.
Yeah, and I'm curious because you don't always see I mean, it's such an intense profession that, especially at the senior levels, where people would often be like, "I don't have time to do that."
Right.
What would you say to other attorneys who have a similar desire to affect change in their communities, but have that kind of thing of like, "Oh, how do I do it?" Like, how do you do it? And has that gotten any easier longer you've been doing it? Have you learned to compartmentalize or be more efficient?
Yeah, gosh, I don't know that I don't know. It gets easier. It would get easier if I could find 25 or 26 hours in the day versus 24. Couple of things. One thing I want to emphasize is that I found my way to Hanson Bridgett because this firm is rooted in community. And one of our core values is serving or showing up in our communities in whatever way makes the most sense for our lawyers. So that may be serving as an elected official, and we have active elected officials serving as partners in the firm. They've run for office and won while they've been partners in the firm. So that's something we both encourage and really celebrate. We have a bevy of appointed officials, just like me as well, who are serving as appointees of state government across, a variety of different boards and bureaus, commissions, and the like. And then we have many, many people showing up in their communities in a variety of different ways as, soccer coaches and, legal aid, on the board of legal aid organizations, whatever makes the most sense to them. But it is a core value at Hanson Bridgett that we lead the way, that we show up in the communities where we live and work to help make them better places. So I really found my way here because of those values. I wasn't here when I was serving on the city council. I was at a different firm, but I knew I wanted to be at a firm that was deeply, deeply rooted in community. So I guess in terms of the balance or the demands, because it's a core value of the firm, again, we really celebrate it. I mean, frankly, it's it's important to us, and it's important to our clients that we're deeply rooted in community as well. We are a California-based firm with offices, like I mentioned, in 8 locations across California. And our clients really benefit from us being active and involved community members.
And so, that's a very broad sort of range of participation. Someone were similar to you 10 years ago or a little bit more than 10 years ago, and they really wanna run for elected office. Given the unique positioning as an attorney who's doing that, what advice would you have for them? Like, on reflecting upon your experience, what advice would you have for
So
them?
we've had exactly that situation here. We had I was going to say he was an associate, but I guess he was a partner at the time. He'd made partner and he came to me and said, "Hey, I'm thinking about running for city council, in the town that I live in down in Southern California. What do you think about it?" And I said, "Do it. You have to do it. We need good people like you doing these sorts of things." And then I said, "How can I support you?" We really do need good people serving in our communities. I think that's one of the things that most concerns me about our politics today is that it turns people away, and they don't want to show up and serve because it seems toxic or it seems dangerous, as you were sort of alluding to previously. So I'd like to think that we're really supportive. I've also been asked by that same person who's now an elected official in Southern California, how do you balance it all? And I had some, some very tactical strategies. I did office hours on Tuesdays, and I was always in the city hall office on Tuesdays. It kind of was, predated remote work a little bit, but I worked remotely those days. I was in the city hall office. I kept, apprised of everything that was going on, but constituents and the staff at the city always knew that I'd be there on Tuesdays, which were also city council meeting days. And so there were tactical things like that I did that I think really helped me balance the two things out. I would be lying to you if I said it wasn't a challenge, just like I'd be lying to you saying it wasn't a challenge to manage the things I'm currently managing all at the same time. But I would also say it's worth it, and just the participation and the benefits outweigh the difficulties.
Great. And I have to ask the colleague's name if you're able to share.
I can share. It's Ellis Raskin. He serves on the Santa Monica City Council down in Southern California.
Amazing. Okay. And cognizant, we spent a lot of time talking about your previous roles,
Yes.
and I asked you the question when you were on city council if you had goals you wanted to achieve. Same question for your current role as managing partner. Do you have a roadmap of what you would like to achieve, or how you'd like to tackle certain challenges in the role?
Yeah. Well, looking back, I was elected to be Hanson Bridgett's next managing partner, I guess 5 or 6 years ago now, but I was going to have a transition year in 2020. A transition year kicked off in February of 2020, right after our annual partner meeting. And my predecessor, Andrew Giacomini, who had served in the role for 20 years, he and I had a grand plan for what 2020 was going to look like as he transitioned out of the role and I transitioned in. And as you know, everything changed in March of 2020 with the COVID-19 pandemic. So I had a lot of grand plans. I had grand plans around strategic planning. I had grand plans around kind of what my vision was, where we needed to go, and then everything was thrown out the window. But I think there's a lot to be said actually from having from being interrupted by a crisis, so to speak. I learned more about the firm than I could have learned probably in a couple of weeks than I could have learned that whole year had we gone through the thoughtful transition process that we had planned to go through. And I also learned about flexibility and resilience as a leader. You never know what you're going to get. One of the most fascinating parts of my job is I really, when I walk into work every morning, don't know what the day is going to look like. Of course, I've got a meeting schedule, but 9 times out of 10, that meeting schedule gets thrown off track by something that's happening, good or bad, frankly, and a lot of good around here too. So there are a lot of things that we have been excited about accomplishing over the years. I think the firm's vision and my vision for rounding out California, we have an all California strategy, as I've talked a little bit about. It was really incredible to see that really come to life this year with the opening of our San Diego and Fresno offices. And by doing that, we're now in every major market in California. So that was both a vision of mine and of the firms, and then something we accomplished earlier this summer that we're just very, very excited about. And we're really excited about what that means for the future of Hanson Bridgett and our ability to service clients.
Great. Exciting times. I do have one last question.
Yeah.
I didn't give you a heads up on this, so it is going to put you on the spot. I love to ask attorneys what they've been reading, listening to, watching that they think other people should really be aware of. And in your case, it might be something that you found a useful resource during all of your various leadership sort of experiences, or it might be something more recent than that, or it could be both.
Yeah.
But more recommendations, the better, to be
I
honest.
love to talk about this stuff. So, a couple of things. The book I just finished reading, and I'm going to forget the author, but the book's title is Sarge, and it's about Sergeant Shriver, who was married into the Kennedy family, founded the Peace Corps, had a significant role in the Special Olympics, was a vice presidential candidate and a presidential candidate, and lived through some just very tumultuous times. So it was a biography of Sergeant Shriver. And it was fascinating. It was a tough read. It was about 700 pages, I think. And it was a true biography, but it had been recommended to me by someone. I can't remember by whom exactly, but it had been recommended because, we're living through some really tumultuous times. And sometimes it's hard or sometimes we think that these are the most tumultuous or nothing like this has ever happened before. But on reflection and reading that book, you realize that people were living through, the assassination of John F. Kennedy, the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., the assassination of Bobby Kennedy, the resignation of Richard Nixon. I mean, so many things were happening that were so tumultuous, and many things going on in the world at the same time, the Vietnam War, et cetera, that there's some lessons we can learn from history. And frankly, some hope that we can all have that there are better times ahead for all of us, notwithstanding how difficult it is. So again, I commend that book to others. It was a tough slog to get through, but it was definitely worth the read. And then I would say I watch very little TV. Something has to give in my life with all the activities I'm involved with, but I really, really like The Diplomat. So, and I've watched that.
Great. Well, there's some holiday period reading and watching recommendations.
Yes.
Kristina, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure. We could talk for days, but I really
Yes.
do appreciate you jumping on and having this discussion.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
And that's a wrap on this week's episode of In the Council's Chair featuring Kristina Lawson. As always, if you enjoyed the podcast, make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also head to the Daily Journal website to catch up on previous episodes. We won't be publishing an episode next week, the Monday following Thanksgiving, but we will be back with a fresh episode the week following. I'll see you then.